I'm Mary Starr with the Wake to Truth podcast. We are very happy to have with us today, once again, Todd Bensman. Many of you who have been on our show watching him before have seen him as just a phenomenal resource. He has over 23 years in journalism. He's worked in counterterrorism intelligence. Todd, how long have you been with the Center for Immigration Studies?
I've been with CIS since 2018, so more than 6 years.
I knew it had been a good while. You just came back from a very interesting trip to Mexico. You actually embedded with some migrants that were trying to make the trek and hid out from people that were trying to stop them. And you have a lot of exciting things to share. So you just take off and go.
Sure. Well, transitions between the Biden, one president and another one are always interesting, especially this one, because down on the border, we have this mass migration for all these years. And, what's going to happen in the transition as the immigrants see that Donald Trump is coming in with a big sledgehammer and a baseball bat, and he's going to try to shut the border down. Are they going to want to come in and rush the border before he gets there and closes it? And so I thought a good place to test that theory out and take a look and see what's going on to be Mexico City, because it's way down there and it's a place that has developed, lots of informal migrant camps all over the city. It's a giant city, one of the biggest in the world, but there's all sorts of thousands, tens of thousands of migrants down there in these camps. So it's a good place to kind of sample what people are thinking. So I went down there. I was there for, the better part of a week and spent a lot of time with the immigrants trying to figure out, what's your plan with Donald Trump coming in? Going to shut the border. What are you going to do? And what I learned was that the majority of them that I spoke to anyway, which it's not a scientific survey, but it definitely shows you that there's going to be a lot more than just the number that I spoke to, is a lot of them are just going to turn around and go home.
So let me ask you something. One of the times when you were on with us before, we talked about Tapachula. We talked about how they were opening the floodgates. And then we hear from, the president of Mexico that maybe they're going to try and deter that. So when they release these people from Tapachula, are those the ones that are in these migrant camps that you're talking about in Mexico City?
A lot of them are, but most of the ones that are in Mexico City are waiting for their number to be called, their ticket to be punched for the CBP-1 phone app that allows the Biden administration put this program together where if you refrain from illegally crossing and just apply for the crossing, we'll bring you in. We'll smuggle you in ourselves as the government. And they brought in almost 2 million people this way on a cell phone app. They let them fly in, or they let them walk over a land bridge. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands. It's still going on to this day. Trump is going to end that on day one. That's the first thing, like at 12:01 p.m. after inauguration, that one dies. That goes away. So all those people down there are waiting in Mexico City, waiting for their number to be called. They got to make a decision. Are you going to try to cross illegally, or you're going to give it up? And a lot of people just said, we're giving up. We're going to go home. We'll wait until inauguration in case we do get called. Maybe at the last minute we'll get called and we'll get to cross into the U.S. and we'll have this 2-year work authorization. And we'll at least have the 2 years, and then they'll have to come get us, right? And that could be another 3 years, So they're just waiting to be called. But the question is, what are you going to do if you're not called? And
Right.
the answer, more often than not, to me was, we're going to go back to Honduras. We're going to go back to Guatemala. We're going to go back to, wherever we came from, Chile, Ecuador. Or some of them are too far from home to go back, so they're just going to stay in Mexico and just take up residency there and become Mexicans. But the Mexican government is interdicting the migration to the northern border because Donald Trump threatened tariffs, 25% tariffs. If I see a bunch of people coming over my border by the time I get into office, it's 25% tariffs on all your trade. So Claudia Sheinbaum, the Mexican new Mexican president, called out the troops, kept the troops out, roadblocks, military is out there, trying to catch anybody who's on the trains, trying to catch anybody who's trying to make a bus, trying to cross illegally, and turning them back around and sending them back down to Tapachula or Mexico City and dropping them off. So it's the Trump trade tariff threat that's got the Mexican military running around. And there are some, though, that are like, I'm not going home and I'm not settling in Mexico. I'm crossing anyway. And that group was the group that was interesting to me. And I wanted to see what would happen with them. So I went out to the rail yards in a town I can't even pronounce right now, Huehueteco, starts with an H, where they were catching the freight train out there. It would stop for 10 minutes. They would be hiding in the brush on either side, and when the train stops, they rush out and hop on and take it to the Texas border. And I went out there to see what was happening and found a bunch of them out there hiding. And I described this whole thing in my article in the Daily Mail about, are they going to make it past the Mexican military and the immigration? And I spent a whole day with a group of about 25 or maybe 30 men, women, and children. There were about 6 kids in my group. And I just spent the whole day with them waiting for a train to come, the right kind of train. And eventually, we had to, move to a landfill, which was no fun. There's a landfill across the way, and so I had to spend the whole day in the trash with them. But, that's, I guess, part of the job. I was asking my boss, do I get landfill hazard pay? And the answer was no, you didn't have to do that. But
well, at
case,
minimum, some new clothes.
Right. And I don't know if I want to give you a spoiler alert or just tell you to go read my story in the Daily Mail if you want to know what happened. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
So there are some, the point being is that there are still, people attempting to cross the southern border in kind of a panic about Trump getting into office. But remember that they are also acutely aware of Tom Homan running around out there saying, we're going to do this mass deportation program. So even if you get it, he's doing that on purpose. He's making the rounds on all the media to make sure that word gets out and permeates down in Mexico City and Tapachula and around the world that even if you do try it and make it, eventually we're going to catch you and send you back. And you're going to lose all the money you spent to get here. So go for it if you want, but we're going to get you. Don't get comfortable.
Well, one thing that I was pleased in what I read of your articles that you were posting, it's very apparent that the Mexican government is taking very seriously the tariff threats, and they are taking an active interest in trying to deter people from heading our way, and that the waves we thought were going to be coming our way are not going to be what we initially expected.
Most definitely. Now, Biden, for the last year, has had the Mexicans out there with the troops doing these operations, but for a decidedly different reason. They just wanted to suppress the numbers so that didn't look bad during the campaign, during the presidential campaign. I mean, it's not going to help you if you're out there talking about the border at a debate when 10,000 people cross that day.
Right.
You have to
You also reported about how Biden had been secretly deporting people, and America didn't even know about it. They were doing that before the midterm elections for that exact reason, because they didn't want the numbers to look terrible.
Right. And they have gotten tough on the border. with using Mexico as their main proxy, but just for the election campaign. So it didn't look bad. If Harris would have won, my feeling is that Scheinbaum would have been, okay, we did our job. We got you elected. We're letting him through. This is a big headache for us to have to do this. We're letting him through now. We're done. But Trump comes in at the last minute and says, hey, trade tariffs, if you let them come, you better keep doing it. Keep doing the Biden program all the way up until I get there, or else it's going to be your economy. Nice economy you got there, afraid if anything bad happened to it, kind of a thing, you know?
Right.
And so he's not even president, and he's having massive influence on the flow over that southern border with the trade tariff threat.
It's not an idle threat. They know he means business with that.
He'll do it. He will do it.
He will do it.
Yeah,
so
and they know it.
Yeah, they do know it. Another thing that I had wanted to talk about, there were so many different things that kind of popped up all at once. I'm not sure if this is a pattern or not. I personally believe there are no coincidences. And so part of me says this is not a coincidence. So we've got this guy in New York who is an illegal immigrant from Guatemala. We know he had to have come through the Darien. His name is Sebastian Zepeda. And you tell your story. I found this interesting because I read about it and there wasn't a lot about it at first. And then it's like, your wife brings this up, and this is a great point.
That's right. So Guatemalan border crosser burns a woman to death in a New York subway. Unbelievably deranged crime, horrible crime. And he lights her clothes on fire with a lighter while she's asleep in a subway car, and then fans the flames and sits back and watched her burn to death. The cops eventually catch up to him, and this is the story out there. Except that I was just telling you, but when we were off air, my wife was just telling me about, did you hear about the guy that burned a woman to death? And I said, you mean the illegal alien from Guatemala? And she goes, what? He was from Guatemala and he was illegal? Not in the press that she read, which tells you a lot about what she's reading. But also that, you know, the media, mainstream media, once again, is really suppressing the full story here, where people just all they know is that some poor woman got burned to death by a person of interest. But if you read other publications, you'll learn that he crossed the border illegally in January of 2018 during the first Trump administration and was promptly deported. And turned around and got back through during the Biden administration border, like so many millions and millions have gotten through, because they just wave them through and they don't care whether you've been deported or not, if they even know about them. There's 2 million illegal immigrants got away clean and never got detected at all into the country. Maybe he was one of those. We don't know, but he was an illegal alien. He did recross, and he did allegedly, anyway, burn this woman to death in New York. We don't know why he did such a heinous thing. It's going to be in the news for a while now. It's not even, you can't say that this is electioneering. The election is over.
No.
We need to talk about this because the deportations are next, and we can't get them underway soon enough. If only they could have deported this guy before he did this, that poor woman would be alive and probably at home just like another normal day or whatever, wherever she was going. But this, to me, is not about Donald Trump winning election, where you have to, you know, create a bigger story than what it is for electioneering. It's just a story in its own right. It's just a horrific act of violence. Never should have happened.
Some people are concerned that this is going to be a growing pattern in the U.S. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, listen, the diversity of crime caused by the illegal immigrants that have crossed is really something unique in the country. Um, it, you know, and the violence involved in it, the kind of violence. I'm not saying that U.S. citizens don't do heinous crimes. I mean, there's Ted Bundy and serial killers and all over the place, but the kind of crime that, like burning a woman to death, that's not that unusual. You can find that type of crime all over the country, committed by people from Central America and elsewhere that come into the country and are just the worst, most heinous kinds of crimes. One comes to mind here in Texas, where, a guy comes in over the border illegally. He's here in Texas. He chains up two women in a trailer and rapes them for a week, then kills one of them, and then starts going after the daughter. The daughter somehow uses her braces. She's like 13 or something, to gnaw through her ropes and manages to run, but he catches her and burns her alive anyway, and shoots her and stuff. I mean, a Haitian down on the beach in Florida sees this nice couple riding two bicycles down the path and knocks them over and, takes a butcher knife and slashes their throats and arms and murders them in a big bloodbath. There are cases like this over and over, and just hyper violent, hyper sadistic cases like this all over the country.
What do you think is the cause of that? Is it a cultural thing, or is it a mental health problem?
Man, I am not expert enough to go there. I don't know what that is, but the brutality involved, like just burning a woman to death and watching her burn to death. I mean, he sat there. They caught him. He said there's video camera of him. He took a seat on a bench and was just like eating popcorn while he's watching her burn to death. Not really eating popcorn, but metaphorically, just watched her burn to death and then left.
Just watching.
Yeah.
And he also supposedly made a comment like to her family, because he knew the video would be getting out. I obviously think that's what he wanted to do. He wanted that notoriety, and he's got it.
I don't know. I mean, all of any kind of crime like that is always just bewildering. I mean, nobody understands it. Criminologists don't understand what that is, but it's part of the human condition.
I don't even have words for that. That is just a tragedy.
It never should have happened.
No, it never should have. That's right.
Let him in. That woman would be alive. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans and even other immigrants that should all be alive today. Had they just had a sewed up border. They had border security. People like that don't get in.
Another thing that you had posted about, and it's interesting, Dr. Angle that we talked about off camera.
H-1B,
H-1B. And then we see that this person in Germany that ran into the crowd of German Christmas shoppers was a doctor. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Big terror attack in Germany, East Germany. And it was conducted in a vehicle. It was a vehicle ramming attack on a Christmas shopping area. And, a lot of people, I think the last I read, there were 5 dead, including a 9-year-old child, and 200 injured. And a lot of them were injured so severely that the body count keeps going up because people are dying in the hospital. They can't save them. Horrific act of violence. There's some disputed reporting about whether he was a jihadi, whether he was an Islamist. He was an immigrant I believe he was from Jordan. I'm sorry, I can't remember where he was from. He might have been from Syria, but in any case, he was a full-fledged doctor working in a hospital there, a clinic, and he, just went off and did this. And it just brought to mind of other cases in the United States that I've written about where doctors did go jihadi and murder and plot to murder, not just in the United States, but all around the world. I mean, just that particular ideology of Islamism, of radical, violent Islamism, is held by a very diverse category of people. You could be wealthy, you can be poor, middle class. A great many of them are highly educated. Like this doctor did what he did. But there was a case here that I wrote about, an H-1B visa holder in the United States by the name of Masood. Last year was sentenced to 12 years in prison for plotting a jihadi attack here in the United States. And he worked for the Mayo Clinic. He was a doctor on this visa for the Mayo Clinic in New York, very prestigious. He was a surgeon in his own country. And he had this plot, fomenting in his mind where he was going to kill all the doctors around him. He just couldn't stand them, that they were all non-believers and kufirs and that sort of thing, and he was going to kill them. He couldn't stand it a minute longer. Anyway, they rolled him up, thank God. But if you look in the history of jihadist terrorism, you find a lot of doctors involved in this. I mean, Zawahiri, the second in command of Al-Qaeda, I think he's now first in command. Or no, we killed him recently, but before we killed him, we just got him. We just hellfired him, I think a year or so ago. He's a doctor. There was a physician's plot. They call it the physician's plot in Europe. 7 doctors all rolled up at once who were planning to bomb, and you talk about violating your Hippocratic oath.
No kidding.
Anyway, the point being is that, jihadis can be anyone, wealthy, professional. In fact, most of them, I'd say, are probably on the wealthier side. Osama bin Laden is an heir to a fortune. He had $100 million fortune. The guy used it all for this. Really, the number of cases are too many to mention here, but I just pointed out that this thing that happened in Germany, it's weird because we don't know for sure that he was a jihadist. They're saying that he actually was an anti-jihadist, and he hated radical extremists and Muslims. I'm doubting that story.
I do too, because why would he have done what he did?
And why would he attack? Why, if he hated Muslims so much, why wouldn't he have attacked Muslims?
Right.
Why did he attack Christmas shoppers who are almost guaranteed to be all Christians?
So in the doctor plot that you're talking about, are these jihadi doctors, are they going after other doctors for the most part, or do you think that they would also go after patients? Because
no, they're going after mass casualty. There's mass casualty attacks. The one in Rochester, the Mayo Clinic guy, he was going to kill other doctors. But then, his plots were shifting. And then another time he was going to go overseas and join ISIS and be a doctor for ISIS. And by the way, ISIS had no shortage of doctors who would harvest the organs of their prisoners before they were executed and sell them on the market or use them for their own purposes. These are like, Mengele type guys from the Nazi Germany era. They had no shortage of doctors that flocked in from all over Europe to join the Islamic State, the Islamic Caliphate. Anyway, not to denigrate all doctors, of course, but I'm just saying that, we shouldn't be that surprised. Oh, he was a doctor. No, lots of doctors do this sort of thing.
I have to say the stereotype is not that type of person. You think that it's someone that is not highly educated, and yet we find different.
Yep.
Wow.
That's true.
So we don't know if this is a pattern or not. We just think that it could be. It could be a sign of things to come, or maybe not. But nonetheless,
yeah, I mean, it could come from anyone, anywhere. I mean, just because somebody's a professional or wealthy, or highly educated, that doesn't mean it's not coming from them. Once they catch that virus, man, it goes in deep. It takes
Right.
root. Doesn't
So
matter who you
when one of these captured jihadis, like, okay, this doctor that you wrote about last year, when he finishes his prison term, I assume that his visa is revoked and they send him packing back to where he came from. Is that
they
a fair
better.
assessment? Yeah, no, they better.
I mean, if they're
I mean,
Democrats in office, they'll probably keep him here and give him a second chance. But yeah, yeah, or if he were to get the death penalty, they would commute it. But
definitely.
hopefully, yeah. I mean, that's supposed to be what happens. They got to be deported.
Well, we've got a few years to wait and see who's in office at that time. But my goodness, it's not a matter of who's in office. It's a matter of common sense and constitutional immigration law.
I agree. I agree.
What else would you like to add as we continue down the path?
Well, I mean, since we're talking about terrorism, I might as well just mention I'm just back fresh from Chicago, where I spent about a week because there was a Mauritanian, that's a West African country, very rich with jihadists running around in that area, and they're crossing the border. We've had about 20,000 Mauritanians cross our southern border, Senegalese, Nigerians, Ghanans, people from Chad, from all over that region, crossing our southern border. And this guy crossed in March of 2023 and made his way to Chicago, where on October 26, he shot an Orthodox Jewish man in the back as part
I
of
remember that.
Yeah, as part of a terror attack. Screaming Allah Akbar, the whole thing. And then the police came and he opened fire on the police, and there was a big furious gun battle in this Orthodox Jewish neighborhood. And they finally wounded him enough to be able to get him under control. But, this would represent the very first jihadist attack by a illegal border crosser on U.S. soil ever. And it's very significant in that it's the first one of these. And, people like me and others have been warning, hey, there's a national security threat in having people from these kind of countries pouring over the border. Eventually, one of them's going to do an attack. And, most of the mainstream media would just say, oh, my God, that's such a crazy fear-mongering, canard. It's not true. Nothing about that is true. There's no Muslims crossing. And if there are, they're not dangerous, and nobody's ever attacked. But now they have. They have attacked. We have had one that they charged him with terrorism. He was formally charged with committing a terrorist act on U.S. soil. And he was going to be put to trial. But unfortunately, he hanged himself in jail a week or two ago. So now there won't be a trial. And I decided I'd go to Chicago to try to investigate everything I could and report what maybe should have come out in trial, but will not come out in trial now because he hanged himself.
Right. So what were you able to gain from that?
Well, I don't want to spoil it because I've got a 3-part series that I'm going to write about.
That's right.
Coming up in about a week. But I will say that I was able to interview the Jewish victim who survived. I'm the first one who's ever even knocked on their door to ask for an interview.
Seriously?
Chicago media, the national media has completely avoided and ignored this story of the first jihadist border crossing terror attack in U.S. history. I was able to interview his rabbi and members of the community, the impacts of this. And, I was able to find his apartment and knock the door and talk to some of his roommates.
I'm a little bit shocked in a way that nobody else has pursued that story. That's a huge story, but they just don't want the story getting out, is what I'm seeing.
Yeah. I mean, it's terrible for the United States that's what's happened with our journalistic institutions, but it's really great for me.
Yes, it is.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, MSM. Todd loves you.
Yeah, I do. I do. That's
That's great.
my
Well,
Christmas
I
gift.
mean, that's why we need you and people like you reporting the truth about what is going on, because MSM is not doing it. They are purposely not doing it. And it's infuriating.
Yeah, they don't want to cover it. It's terrible. It's the same thing with the Guatemalan who burned a woman to death. My wife's reading all about this and going, "Did you hear about the terrible crime that happened?" I like the one that with the illegal immigrant from Guatemala. And she's like, "What? I didn't know
Uh-huh.
that."
Okay, since we've got Guatemala on topic, what about this Lev Tahor cult that was just busted? It hit the news in the last few days. You have a little bit of insight on that.
Yeah, Lev Tahor. There's a big story. You can find it. Probably Google Lev Tahor. It's an Israeli cult. Very sort of bizarre, twisted interpretations of the Old Testament. That they abide by a certain interpretation of it. Their problem is that they believe that you can marry girls who are 12 years old or over. That's their big problem. And
let me guess that they never cheat on that age. Never.
yeah. So, they've been on the run all around the world. Their cult, their community is, Canada. They got chased out of Canada. It's always about, pedophilia, because that's part of their religion. And so they ended up in Guatemala. They had a compound there and businesses and things, and they were operating there. But, the Israelis are kind of tracking them, and the Canadians are tracking them because there's some Canadian citizens and there's some U.S. citizens that are part of it as well. And they put pressure on the Guatemalans. And finally, there's a big raid, and a bunch of them were seized and arrested and extradited, and their whole compound was broken up in Guatemala. Well, I only know about this group because a year or 2 years ago I was down in Tapachula reporting on the regular mass migration, and there were these guys in the crazy robes, and the women in full burqas, and I'm like, "Hey, who are you guys?" And yeah, we're Lev Tahor, and we're being persecuted in Guatemala. So we're going to set up here in Mexico. And I just met them on my last day or two in the country, and I didn't really have a chance to really do that story. I'm sorry now, because it probably, maybe if I'd have done the story earlier, I might have saved the victimization of some children. That's what I'm thinking.
Right.
But I just didn't know the significance of it. But anyway, I recently posted my photos, and somebody else posted a video that I'd posted. I forgot I posted it a couple of years ago of those guys down there. But I interviewed them a little bit. I had some text exchanges where I tried to get an interview with their group in Mexico down in Tapachula. But in the end, they said no. So the next day I was leaving back for the States. And so that was that. I did try to get an interview with them and their group that had just fled Guatemala. I don't know why they're still in Guatemala. And the whole thing is just confusing. But anyway, Lev Tahor, another strange, weird thing in Mexico. There are many strange, weird things in Mexico.
Right. One of the things that I read is that the Israelis, the true Israelites, they are saying, we have nothing to do with this group. They broke off from us. They are not part of us. We do not support them. And we do support the Guatemalan government going after them. And so they made it very clear that they had no part in that. I was not shocked by that, but I was glad that they were very vocal about that. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's just like, any of these cults here in the United States. What's the one that went down to Guyana and everybody drank the poison? And
Jim Jones.
Jim Jones. I mean, U.S. government's not responsible for that. They killed a congressman. They killed a couple of congressmen, I think, down there. But it is what it is. You know, you have these crazy cults that go abroad, they're living, doing, you know, illegal things. And yeah, we want to catch it.
Yes, we do, for sure. Well, we have covered a lot of really good information today. Is there anything that you want to add as we kind of wind down?
Not really. I mean, you can go see my writings. I've been writing a lot, an awful lot since the election because there's been an awful lot to write about. So you could go to my website, toddbensman.com, and find all of my writings there and my media interviews, most of them. Um, and you can find all of my social media there. Sign up for my newsletter if you want to stay in touch. Whenever I publish something new, I usually put it out on my newsletter. That's about it.
I will vouch for your newsletter. I love it. It's well written, it's quick to the point, and very full of good information. I truly do love it. I'm not just saying that, I mean it. So I would highly encourage our listeners to go sign up for Todd's newsletter. It's great. So thank you for sending that out. Well,
Yeah,
Todd, once again, well, it's my pleasure. Thank you again for coming on with us today. Obviously, it'll be the new year before we are on together again. And you've got your series coming out right after the first of the year. You already made that clear, so we'll look forward to that. But thank you so much for coming on with us. It's always a delight and a pleasure because you have so much information, and we thank you.
Great to be here. Thank you. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Wishing everyone all the best. So thanks again.